Welcome and thank you for joining us for the Humboldt and Del Norte County's third Thursday Master Food Preserver Volunteer Program. Tonight we'll be discussing strawberries. They're in season. So my name is Melody Pope and I'm a ferment, and that means I am learning to be a Master Food Preserver volunteer through the University of California's Cooperative Extension, and I will be certified as a Master Food Preserver in Food Preserver Volunteer in 2021, this year, 2021. So tonight I'm delighted to be assisting one of the many Master Food Preservers that we work with, and that's Jerry Cunningham. She has been a Master Food Preserver volunteer since 2017, and she has some great experience and some tips that she's going to share with us regarding different types of strawberry products. And we'll also discuss different types of pectin and compare these products and some healthy options as well in fruit leather and preserving in that method. Master Food Preservers are a volunteer organization within the University of California's Cooperative Extension. We are trained and certified by the University of California, and it's guided by a statewide UC Master Food Preserver program. Our core mission is to keep fellow Californians safe and help them use their culturally appropriate but also research-based practices to safely preserve food in their home, helping to reduce food waste, helping to increase our food security, and provide the engaging ways that Californians can explore healthy food and healthy food choices. This evening, we'll be using many products and brands throughout the presentation. We just want to let you know that that's not an endorsement of any of the products, but particularly as we discuss the pectin, you'll see various brands that I'll talk about. And I'm just presenting those as different options. They're not all of the options that are out there, but in our mission, we strive to educate, and that's our goal, to help you be informed about what is available and some of the differences within those. We are joined in our efforts tonight by Dorina Espinoza. She is the Humboldt County, Del Norte County Extension Youth and Families and Communities Advisor. Dorina has been a Master Food Preserver since 2018, and she will be helping us manage the technology and monitoring questions and the Zoom, that sort of thing. So with that, I will turn it over to Dorina so that she can share some technical information with you.
Great, thank you, Melody. Welcome, everyone. I'm trying to both do, there we go. I just want to share that the process that we'll do this is I will mute everyone who is not the presenter. So I'll mute myself and everyone except Jerry and Melody. And any questions that you have, I'll ask that you place them in the chat. And in the chat, I will be monitoring throughout the presentation so that I can make sure to ask Jerry and Melody your questions as they come along. We have 3 different spots where we have breaks for the questions, and that seems to be a lot easier to go in that process.
And I hope that you're seeing all this luscious bounty that from farmers markets and grocery stores, and maybe even from your own garden. We have such a luscious bounty that we're harvesting this year. And I wish you were here, because this is delightful. It is wonderful to smell strawberries. So what do we do with it? Well, one of the things that we can do with strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, any type of berries, as well as other fruits, is to make fruit spreads. Now you might be saying, well, what's a fruit spread? I'm not sure I've actually used that term. It's kind of a broad category, and it covers all the different types of things. You might be very familiar, first of all, with jam. Now what jam means is made from crushed fruits I think maybe you can see that. I hope you can see that on the screen. It's very spoonable. It's made from fresh fruits. It's not clear. It's not translucent. Another type of fruit spread that you're probably very familiar with also is jelly. So this is a jelly that I made, pop the top, that is balsamic strawberry jelly. Now you can see that this is also spoonable. It's a little bit translucent, and it's also, if I were to dump this container upside down, it's going to kind of hold the mold. Think about like canned cranberry sauce. So that is jelly. Something else you're probably familiar with is preserves. And preserves are a clear jelly or a clear type of fruit juice jelly that has things kind of suspended in them. And that could be fruits, or it could be, in this case, a marmalade, which you can see in here. I'm not going to pop the top on this one, but you can see what in marmalade, what's suspended in it is the peels of the citrus. Now you see, okay, so you can see it. It's still translucent. It's not like jam. It's not mashed up fruit, but it is a translucent juice, jelly juice with the citrus in there. I don't have an example to show you this, but there's also conserves that are made with one or more fruits. And oftentimes they will have something like nuts or coconut in it. And you might think of like chutneys. Chutney kind of falls in that conserve. Plus, those are the jelly products. And then plus you can also, there's a variety of other things, including fruit butters that fall in that category of fruit spreads. So what makes the gel? How do you make something that looks like this? Or looks like, or is not watery, but has a nice texture like jam? Well, there's three things that are needed besides the fruit. You need some sort of pectin, and then you need an acid, and then you need sugar or some other approved sweetener for the recipe that you're using. Now, Melody is going to talk a little bit more about various commercial types of pectin that you might have. Some fruits that are added. Some fruits, like this marmalade, does not have any additional pectin in it because citrus has enough natural pectin in the peel that it doesn't have to have an added commercial pectin to it. Same would be the same with like apple butter. It doesn't have any added pectin. Or some apple jellies too, you would be cooking to the soft gel stage, meaning 8 degrees above your boiling water temperature. So how do you make these, how do you make all these lovely things come together? Well, first of all, very important, always, always, always use an approved recipe. Now, sometimes the things you find on the web are not always the best recipes. Sometimes the things you find in Grandma's recipe book may not always be the best recipes either. You always want to use an approved recipe. And so one source of approved recipes is this book, So Easy to Preserve. It's from the Cooperative Extension of the University of Georgia. It's kind of for the Master Food Preserver, one of our Bibles that we use. There are other books that are also on our list of approved ball canning books. This one is particularly really good because if you're new to canning, that gives you a very comprehensive guide of how to go about it and what the equipment is that you're going to be needing. Another good book to use is America's Test Kitchen. Again, these are all approved recipes. They've all been tested. They've all been tested both for safety as well as for quality. And this is one we're going to talk a little bit today, a little later about pomona pectin. And so this is another book of approved recipes with pomona pectin. So you want to select your fruits. And I call this the 3 F's criteria for selecting fruit. You want to have it fresh. You want to have it firm. In other words, no soft spots. And you don't want to have, and you want to have it free from mold or any other defects. So you always want to use the freshest fruits. You don't want to have anything spoiled in here, because all that's going to do is just spoil your product once you either can it or freeze it. If you are water bath canning, and so let me explain, we're not going to demonstrate water bath canning to you, but I will say, like a jar like this, it has a 2-part lid that I can store in the shelf and store in my pantry with the lid off, but when it's canned, it was using a 2-part lid. That requires a little extra equipment than what you're going to see demonstrated tonight. So if you're not familiar, this is water bath canning. I think I can show you a picture other than doing I can show you there with a picture. You're going to have a big kettle. You're going to have jars with the 2-part lids. And you're going to be following your directions to the T, following your directions for water bath canning as far as your processing time, as far as your ingredients. And you can see that maybe takes a fair amount of equipment. You need to have an appropriate kettle. You need to have a jar lifter, a timer, a rack. And you can see down in the bottom corner there, the 2-part, what I mean by the 2-part lids. Another way you can do it is, of course, freezing. And that's what we're going to demonstrate tonight. Because freezing is a very easy way that you can do some of your jams and jellies if you're using the appropriate type of pectin. I'll demonstrate that in a little bit after Melody talks a little bit about pectin. What not to do. Okay, what not to do. As I said, always use an approved recipe. Some of us grew up, and I'll tell you, by the grace of God, we did survive. Some of the things you might remember, jelly jars with that layer of paraffin on the top of it to seal it. Don't do that, because it really does not effectively keep mold or bacteria out. Sometimes that's called the open kettle method. In other words, you're using an open kettle, you're making your jam or your jelly, then you put it into a jar, and you might use a 2-part lid. You might just use the type of lid that comes with a jelly jar that you personally bought, and you put it upside down. And yes, it might seal, but you haven't gone through the steps of actually expelling the oxygen from that. That's the only, you need to do canning to do that. And if the oxygen is not fully removed, that means that mold can form under the seal. Or if you leave it too long after it's been opened in your refrigerator on your shelf, you can have mold form under the seal. And this is something I don't know if you can see it actually. If I hold it up there, you can see it on the other camera. Do you have the countertop one on? Maybe I can try to do it right here. You can actually see there's some mold on this. That's because I was intentionally trying to do mold. And so when I was intentionally trying to do mold, I left this in the refrigerator for about 4 weeks. And it looks a little fuzzy on the top. Now you may have grown up hearing, oh, just kind of scrape that off the top. Well, I'll tell you, what you're seeing is like an aspen forest. You're seeing the tops of the trees. Underneath is all the filaments of the roots. because mold is like a plant that grows down. So it's not sufficient just to kind of scrape it off the top. You really just have to dispose of the whole thing once you get mold. So again, always use an approved recipe. Follow your directions. If you are canning, then you will be making something that with a 2-part lid that you can put on your shelf. If you're not canning and you're using a freezer type container and it goes in the freezer, we'll be talking about that in a couple minutes. So I think then we're ready to go back to Melody for the pectin comparisons.
So pectin is a naturally occurring fiber, not fiber, but structure. And it's kind of like what we would refer to as the glue in the plant world. And it's these long chains of polysaccharide molecules, and they form together, or they blend together to form this structure that leads us to having a jam or a jelly. So as a new ferment, I was exploring these different types of pectins, and there's so many choices out there. Now, what I found out, interestingly enough, is some of these are identical, but just different in their processes or in their marketing. So we have our classic Sure Gel. I think this is the one that I always remember my grandmother using. It's in a powder form, it's in a liquid form, it's in talk about that in a minute, a low sugar. These are the same. This is a Mrs. Wages. This is just a classic pectin, okay? And so it comes in all of these different forms that we can use. And as Jerry was saying, the thing that you need for the pectin, for the polysaccharide molecules to work, are sugar and an acid. So for some people, that can be an issue. Now, when we look at these pectins, we find, or I found 2 different types. I found a high moxyl pectin, excuse me, and a low, or what's called a low moxyl pectin. And the low pectin depends, it's a different chemistry that's at work there. But for these regular, standard, historically what we've had for decades type of pectin, we're using that sugar and that acid to create the structure of the gel or the structure of the jam or the conserve, whatever it is that we're making. So for these 4 types of pectin that I have here, when I make my strawberry jam, with this 4 cups of strawberry that my friend Jerry gave me yesterday. These are just so beautiful. I just love the flavor of fresh strawberries. When we make 4 cups, when we use this 4 cups of fresh fruit, and I looked at all the different fruits and pretty much the ratio is the same, I'm going to have to use this much sugar. So this is 7 cups of sugar for these types of pectin. So that got me to thinking, because in my other life, as what I do in the daytime is I'm a nurse and a nurse practitioner. So I run across a lot of people who like to preserve their foods, especially their fruits, and have them throughout the year. They're gardening, they're trying to do all these things to stay healthy, but when they go to preserving or making jam or jelly, they're using these large amounts of sugar. So that's a concern for me. It may not be a concern for some people. So then I started looking at the low sugar. So we have brands that have low sugar, and they are 5 cups of sugar. So shy of opening another one of these, okay, I would need to show you, I would have to open up another one of those to show you the 5 cups of sugar, right? So a lot of sugar going on here. The other thing that I found out that is very different about our sugar, and even our sugar-free, requires 3 cups of sugar. So the sugar-free, it's a little deceiving on the label, because what I discovered is that it's the pectin that's sugar-free, not the jam that's sugar-free. So that can be a little bit deceiving. So with the processing that you're using, these pectins can be used for your cooked jam. They can be used for your freezer jams, but there are some caveats in that. For example, they're very strict in their, or very adamant in their documentation as they give it to you, that says be sure not to reduce the sugar in your recipes, otherwise your jam won't set up. So that's kind of like, you, for those of us that don't want to have a lot of sugar, that's really can be an issue. I did discover, and I had never heard of it before I started in the Master Food Preserver Volunteer Program, pomona pectin. And so pomona pectin is a little bit different in that it is made with peels, and it is also not a pectin that you use a lot of sugar for. So to use this pectin, you have 2 packets, and you hear my cuckoo clock there, which is always set for a few minutes early. So I apologize for that. But with these pectins here, with this particular pectin, you can get more than one batch of your jelly or jam out of this pomona pectin. Now I'll talk about that a little bit more, the process there. But with these, for example, if I'm using this liquid, which is it's the ball liquid, real fruit liquid pectin, use the whole packet. So there's 2 packets in here. With this one, you use the whole packet. With this one, you use the whole packet, the whole box. You can buy it in this kind of a bulk kind of canister, but it is still, you're still not getting a lot of bang for your buck out of that, in my humble opinion. So when we get to where we can have sugar, or we don't want to have a lot of sugar, the pomona is a pretty good option for us. And what you have is you have your pectin, and you have this little packet of what you make is calcium water. So of course the nurse in me is like, what, calcium water? What are you drinking that for? No. When you put this into you can mix this, and then you use, depending on your recipe, tablespoon, 2 teaspoons, just depends on the recipe. Then you can actually put this in the refrigerator and keep it, of course, labeled with what it is and the date, as we would want to do as a master food preserver. Label and date everything, right? And I just discovered from Dorina that she actually keeps hers in the freezer. So you can safely keep it in the freezer. And you use this calcium water, and then you use your pectin, and you follow the recipes according to that. But this is with pomona pectin, okay, and my 4 cups of strawberries that I'm making a batch of jam or jelly, whichever I'm making is probably gonna be jam, because I hate to throw the strawberries out. Then I would, I actually eat them. I apologize. I digress quickly and easily, but I was thinking about these fresh strawberries, and I'm planning to actually make some jam this weekend. And this is exciting to me because I only have to use 3/4 of a cup of sugar. And if I use honey, I only have to use a half a cup. So that to me is kind of a really great thing, because I'm a fan of honey. So I, as I look through the pectins, I can see there's sometimes you want to use one or the other because maybe the recipe calls for it to be cooked or calls for it to not be cooked. With this pectin, with this brand of pectin, there is a special freezer pectin, a no cooking 30-minute jam pectin that is used, because that structure, when you heat the pectin, that structure can change if you don't have the right pectin. So you want to be very aware of what your recipe calls for in terms of what types of pectin is called for.
I do like Pomona pectin, and I will say it's a different type of process. It's called a low methoxyl type of pectin, and it does the gelling not because of the high sugar content. It does the gelling because of the added calcium water. That is the ingredient that does the gelling for you. I know people have asked me, well, I tried making some jelly, and gee, I just didn't want all that sugar, so I cut the sugar, and it didn't come out. Came out runny. Well, yeah, that's what's going to happen with the other brands of pectin. If you don't have, it's about 65 to 70% sugar to your fruit, it's not going to gel. Also, except for the one that Melody said is specifically designed for freezer jam, you cannot use a commercial pectin like Sure Gel and freeze it. You will probably get separation when you do that. I will say with Pomona, you can either can it using the water bath canner. So remember, this was the one with the 2-part lid. This is a jelly that I made just a couple weeks ago with Pomona jelly. Or you can freeze it. So here's an example of a freezer that doesn't have a 2-part lid. It has a freezer lid on it. So this is stored in the freezer. This, after it's water bath canned, can be stored on the shelf. And any Pomona pectin recipe, you can do both for freezing and for water bath canning. Just kind of what's in the box. You get a recipe sheet. You will also get a, also on here is the website, pomonapectin.com. There's more recipes on there. Melody said you get a larger packet that's labeled pectin and a smaller packet that's labeled calcium. And so this calcium is monocalcium phosphate. If you're curious what type of calcium, the pectin is low methoxyl citrus pectin. So in other words, it's purely made from lemon peels, and it has no added sugars. Even those false sounding things like maltodextrin doesn't have anything like that. It doesn't have any preservatives in it. So when you get your box of pectin and you're going to be making jam or jelly, the first thing you want to do is take the smaller packet that says calcium, and you're going to dissolve that. So there's instructions on that recipe sheet. What you do is you take a half a cup of water in a clear jar with a lid, and you put in a half a teaspoon of powder in the small packet. And you're going to look at me and you're going to say, well, that's not a half a cup of water. That's only about a couple ounces. Well, this is my third batch of jam or jelly that I've made with this calcium water. It will stay in the refrigerator for, usually I can keep it, maybe 6 to 8 months if I need to. Again, you're not using very much of it. And I do label it. If you can see at the top, or maybe up here, you can see that I do label it, saying calcium water and the date. If it should start looking, it's going to look cloudy. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but it's going to look a little cloudy. And as it sits in the refrigerator, there's going to be some sediment that comes down to the bottom. If that starts to sort of look fibrous, or if you've got any mold, then you want to toss it right away. But again, in the refrigerator or in the freezer, this will stay fine for up to 6 months. And you're not going to use a whole package for each batch of jam that you do. One of the nice things too about pomona pectin is you can half or double or triple your recipes. You cannot do that with any other type of commercial pectin. You must use exactly the ingredients, but you can do that with pomona pectin. So we're gonna make some freezer jam. I have 4 cups of mashed strawberries. And usually when I'm mashing strawberries, I've already mashed this for time's sake, but usually when I'm mashing strawberries, I use kind of this potato masher. Works really well. This is also doing this raw freezer jam that requires no cooking is a great thing to do with kids. My grandson just loves to do that because he gets to mash the strawberries, or my husband did that this afternoon for me, to mash the strawberries. So anyway, you would just mash it until you get to kind of the consistency of jam. Sometimes you might, I like chunky jam myself. So I do have fairly big chunks in here. So your 4 cups of mashed strawberries into your bowl. The next thing you're going to do is turn on your kettle for some hot water. I'll get to that step later. So again, when we're preparing your fruit too, I should have mentioned when you're preparing your fruit, make sure that it follows those 3F criteria. Fresh, firm, free of mold or any other things that you should not have on the fruit. You want to wash your strawberries. If you're using fresh, then you're going to hull them, and you're going to you can chop them or slice them, whichever you prefer to do. So the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to add some acid to it. And this recipe calls for lemon juice. Whenever you're canning and it calls for lemon juice, you are going to want to use bottled lemon juice. And that may sound counterintuitive when we're talking about preserving nature's bounty. You're saying, well, why can't I use fresh? One of the reasons is that different types of lemons will have a different acidity level. So you are always going to use a standard bottled lemon juice because that will have the right acidity level for what has been in your tried and true tested recipes. So for this recipe, it calls for 1/4 cup of lemon juice, 2 ounces. So I should have shaken the bottle. I'm going to put that in. Then you're going to add your sweetener of choice. And I'm choosing to use sugar today. You would use between 3/4 of a cup to 2 cups of sugar. I've got a cup of sugar here. That's kind of the right sweetness that I like if you were using something like Sure Gel, and you were making jam with 4 cups of strawberries, you would be using about 4.5 cups of sugar. So I'm using 1 cup of sugar. Add that in. You also have choices. We all like to have choices with our sweeteners. As I said, I'm just using plain organic sugar right now. But I could use also agave syrup, or I could use honey. I could use maple syrup. You could use some other artificial sweeteners like xylitol. If you're using a liquid sweetener like agave syrup or honey, then you would be putting in 1/2 to 1 cup of honey. And by the way, this recipe is on the resources that you are getting from us. So you would be stirring that all in. You want, especially with your sugar, you want to make sure that it's all dissolved, or if you're using something like honey or agave syrup, that is thoroughly mixed in. So then I said, you're going to bring your water to a boil. Now this is the only special equipment that you need for freezer jam. And so if you're doing a water bath canning jam, I showed you needed all kinds of equipment like the kettle and the jar lifter, the 2-part lids. The nice thing about freezer jam is the only special equipment that you're going to use is a blender. And you want to have a blender that has a vented lid on it. So, I am missing something. I'm missing a measuring cup. I knew I'd forgotten something. Okay, so you're going to want to take 3/4 cup of boiling water. I got my boiling water right here. Okay, and put it in your blender. And then this now comes the hardest part of this whole process, because you're going to be measuring in, you're measuring in 3 teaspoons of pectin for this. And you want to kind of drop it right in the middle so that you're not dropping it along the side of your blender container, because otherwise then you have to scrape it down or whatnot. If you do, you could do the blending and then you could add a little extra water or some of the fruit juice to try to get that. So I'm going to be very careful, and I'm going to drop my, double check here, 3 teaspoons of pectin out of the larger bag that's in that box. Very carefully right down in the middle. So I'm landing right on top of the water and not getting it on the side of the container. Okay, I'll put this off to the side. And okay, I don't know if you can see this, but you can see, maybe see that's all liquefied now into there. And you're going to pour this mixture in, scraping the sides of your container. So you're going to scrape all this out of your blender container as much as you can. And I suppose you could use a small, I've never actually done it with a small food processor. I think it was, because you're not using a whole lot. Essentially you got 3/4 cup of water and a couple of teaspoons of 3 teaspoons of the pectin. So you've got all your pectin into your fruit mix. You want to stir that in. But when I'm making this with my grandson, I said, okay, now we've got all this. Now the magic is going to happen. And so and this is what you would use for any type of berry: strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, sour cherries, sweet cherries, also as well as pears and kiwis and blackberries. If you're using, I got a little bit chunky here, I'm gonna get it out. Okay. You take your calcium water, shake it up, and then you add the calcium water to your mix. So again, this is not anything you have to cook other than boiling the one. So I'm going to put in 4 teaspoons of calcium water. Stir it up. See if it's at your desired consistency. This is still a little bit too soupy, I think. So I might think I would want to add just a little bit more calcium water. Stir it up. I'm going to add a 5th teaspoon. And then you can start to feel also it's going to, it's going to feel like you would expect a jam to feel as you're stirring it. You can see it's a little bit more floppy. It comes off the spoon, and that's probably about your right consistency. As I said, the so easy part of this is, other than boiling the water, you're not getting your kitchen hot, which is nice in summertime. You may also know that, at this time, because of COVID and whatnot, it's really hard to come across these 2-part lids. You can find jars and lids now in a lot of places, but still it's kind of hard to come across 2-part lids. But any grocery store you go into, you can get freezer containers of all sizes. Either quarter pints, pints, half pints. This is kind of if I'm using plastic, this is kind of my preferred one, because it has a fill line right here, which for freezer jams, you want to go kind of the half. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm using my little measure here. I'm going down to the fill line, which is about 1/2 inch. If you were doing a can, you would be 1/4 inch, mostly for jams, but for freezer jams, because you can have a little expansion when it's freezing, good idea down to do 1/2 inch. So I'm going to put some in here. Put up my 1/2. Back to my, I got plop a little bit too much in here. Go down to my fill line, and then add my top. Now, of course, you have wanted to have washed and thoroughly rinsed your jars. You can also do glass jars. And so here's a standard 1/2 pint glass jar. By the way, you're going to go down again, especially with glass. You definitely want to go, if you're using something like a small container like that, maybe 1/4 inch is good enough headspace. But definitely with glass, and you're putting it in the freezer, you definitely want to go down to 1/2 inch. Which, I don't know if you know this, but the end of the line here, that's 1/2 inch. You have your swirl of the ridge right here. The bottom is a 1/2 inch. I'm kind of measuring it down to right there at the bottom of your swirl right here is 1/2 inch. So I'm going to fill up some of these You want to directly put these in a freezer. And so what I do, if I'm using a glass jar, first of all, I'm going to be very careful putting it in the freezer. I did drop a whole batch one time. I was very sad to have done that. But I always, if I'm using a glass jar for a freezer jam, I top it with a plastic cover. That way I don't get confused as to what is freezer jam and what is not freezer jam. So we're going to top that with a cover. Now, are there questions while I'm continuing to fill those jars? Are there any questions to be asked?
There sure are.
Okay.
So one of the questions is a little bit earlier. How long is the jam good for once taken out of the freezer?
So with pomona pectin, you generally have about 2 weeks after you take it out of the freezer. With another type of commercial pectin, you would have about 3 weeks after you take it out of the freezer. And then of course you have it in your refrigerator, not in your pantry after you've opened it. That's what's recommended. That one with the mold that I showed you, I thought I had it in the refrigerator. I took some from a partial jar and I just kind of left it open in the refrigerator. It actually took 4 weeks to make mold. I wasn't sure I was going to get any mold on it. But so that's why you want to use the type of jar, the size of jar that you know, what, regardless of what type of pectin you're using, the type of jar that you know you're going to finish off in 2 to 3 weeks. So, you know, like the balsamic jelly, when I made that, I put it in a quarter pint. Marmalade, I like marmalade. You know, that kind of goes into a half pint. My grandson will eat a half pint of freezer jam on the weekend. So we never have to worry about that being too long into the refrigerator.
So is there a minimum amount of time that is needed for the jam to be in the freezer before you can use it?
Nope, nope. Matter of fact, this I made when we did our dry run the other night. And it's just as good as if I had it in the freezer for 4 months. Ideally, you don't want to keep it in the freezer for more than 6 months, although I will say I probably have done that, but I think the recommendation is 6 months in the freezer. But no, there's no setup time, if that's the question.
And then early on in the presentation, you and Melody had talked about approved and tested recipes. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by those words, approved and tested, and by whom are they approved and tested, and how are they approved and tested?
So they are approved and tested by cooperative extension services. So in California, that's UC Davis. You fall under the UC Davis Cooperative Extension Program. They can also be other ways that are approved by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, but they would be tested scientifically in a laboratory to make sure that the process absolutely gives you a safe and quality project.
Right, and it's my understanding all of our university extensions in every state across the country has a university extension that was started by I believe President Roosevelt, if my history serves me correctly. And they have the equipment to test the acidity, to test for microorganisms, pathogens, and all of those things that might grow in the food. So they have the equipment to do that. They also have the equipment that they can adjust for pressures and different processing times in terms of where you live. For example, I live by the coast, so I'm at sea level, but I moved here from Denver, Colorado. So I was in a mile high city. So cooking and processing can be different based on where you live. And because the extensions are across the country and they're able to test in different altitudes, then it allows for that recipe to be adjusted, to be approved, and to be developed. And so that's part of the process of getting them approved.
And the little rule of thumb that I can share with all of you is that if you put the word extension, if you're looking for a recipe and you type cooperative extension or extension in front of the recipe that you're looking for, oftentimes the hits that you'll get will be from a extension office in either California or another state. So then you know that it's actually a tested and approved recipe.
One of the things that I have found when I've been doing my research as a ferment is that because there's one in every state, you may find a recipe in one state that you might not necessarily find in another state, only because that's a product that they grow there or harvest there, or somehow maybe comes from the ocean or the river, or some sort of resource that they have naturally there, and so they have different recipes. So that's an exciting, I think, an exciting thing to explore too.
So you can see we've got 6 pints here. We'd want to label these too, and usually I just use a freezer tape on it and label it with your time. Yeah, you know, before here I came from New Mexico, and New Mexico has, I think, the best pepper recipes, salsa recipes. Washington State has some great recipes for fish and for all types of that.
So in this strawberries being in season, I started talking to Jerry and others about what are some of the other things that we could do with strawberries if we're not making jam. And so the dehydration came up. Now, so I didn't run out and buy an expensive dehydrator. I borrowed one to see if I'd like it. I tried some putting it out in the sun, and I couldn't kind of tolerate the flies and the things that were going on there. So in our environment here on the coast, sun drying is probably not a good option for me. I did try some spreading some dehydrated out into the oven and talking about making fruit leathers. So very simple, very simple. I just took my 4 cups of strawberries, put them into the blender. The recipe, which is also on our website, is for the 4 cups of strawberries and 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. And so I spread that out. The first time I tried, like I said, I was going to start it outside, and then I was like, oh, I can't take this. So I brought it in, and I had a dehydrator that I borrowed that didn't quite work out as well as I had hoped. So it ended up on some toast and other things. Then I thought, I have an oven, so I'll try my oven. Now, my oven only goes down to 140 degrees, but what I did learn is that truly dehydrating is an art. But let me just share with you what I have here. This is actually, I have 2 plates of this, but they turned into nice thin, they wouldn't roll up like a fruit leather, but a thin, more chip consistency. And I have to tell you, it's still delicious. It's still very, very good. So kind of like a chip would work. I wanted them to be nice fruit roll-ups, like these commercial roll-ups that you see. And you've probably all seen these, right? These fruit by the foot. That's an empty box. I teach nutrition, so you bear with me. I collect empty boxes. fruit roll-up sours, those sort of things. One of the things I noticed about the fruit that we are processing, this, like I said, it's just strawberries and lemon juice. Every single one of these are their first ingredient, their main ingredient is corn syrup. So for what that's worth, corn syrup should not be the first main ingredient. On the organic fruit twist, I found this. It was not as bad. It's all puree concentrates, different puree concentrates. So there's still some sodium in it and 12 grams of sugar. It's got 10% added sugar. So the other thing that I did is I borrowed another dehydrator, not realizing the differences between dehydrators. This time I ended up with a round dehydrator that I had borrowed. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can't, in that particular dehydrator, the trays look like this. And so you can't really spread your fruit out on there as well. So I thought, what about just chopping up these strawberries and putting them in the dehydrator? And so these are also just sliced up strawberries that have been dehydrated. Now, when I started snacking on these, this jar was full, just for the record. These are great. I could see these being chopped up or put into, well, I have put them in my Cheerios. I could see them being chopped up and put into a trail mix or into oatmeal, you know, preserving and dehydrating them and putting them into any type of hot cereal. And so that's another option for preserving the strawberries, is to either do some sort of fruit leather where you just blend it up, put it out on your sheet, either put it into a dehydrator, put it into the oven, and then have it that way, or just slicing it and putting it into the dehydrator and using it, preserving it that way. I was really excited because they taste great. There's no sugar added, and I have a grandson who has issues with red dye, actually all dyes, but particularly red dye. And so all of these products are out for him. He can't ever have them. And these, I'm excited that this summer he'll be here for what we call Camp Grandma. And so he'll have some roll-ups. I will practice that. It truly is an art, and I know that Jerry makes it, and she showed me some, and I was so excited. But you know, chips are good too. So kids like chips just and texture, I think, as much as they do the leathers. So there's always, I think, a way for us to look at using the fruit that's in season in a way that we can preserve it without adding a bunch of stuff into it. And so that's exciting to me as I learn to be a master food preserver. I wish I could show you some fruit leather that turned out really well for me, but I'm hopeful that I will have some tomorrow. I have some in another dehydrator that I borrowed that is working really well. So I appreciate that.
So Melody, about how thick were the strawberry slices for the strawberry dehydration?
I sliced them at about 1/4 of an inch. Now I have to say they would not be acceptable for a county fair, because it's my understanding they'll have to be the same size when you slice them for the county fair. But I sliced them about 1/4 of an inch. I didn't put anything on them, no lemon juice or anything, and they dehydrated really well, and they taste really good. So I'm excited because the strawberries are in season, and they are so good for us, you know, with the vitamin C that they have in them, and just preserving them, I think, is really helpful. But yeah, lots of fun.
Great, thank you.
So thank you, Melody, and I told Melody that not to despair. That was a really good learning process for her. Couple hints: if you're doing like the strawberry chips, what you would want to do is one of the things you could do is use like a very sharp egg slicer, and like a hard-boiled egg slicer that gives you the kind of the right thickness too, or you can, you know, do it up by yourself. The thing with the fruit leather, it's a bit of an art, but it's also very dependent on temperature, and that's why it's difficult to do fruit leather in your oven, because you might not have the right temperature. You have to have 140 degrees, and not all dehydrators will give you that temperature adjustment. Once you get it down, it's easy to do. I wish I had some to show you. My grandson loves it so much, I don't have any to show you. But I can show you some other things. So what do you do with all this lovely stuff that you're preserved? Of course, you know, jam on toast is always the favorite. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, that's always the favorite. My husband likes to take jellies like this, and this is a balsamic strawberry jelly, so it has a real nice rich flavor. You can use it for glaze on meat. You can use it as accompaniment for meat. You might want to add a little wine or a little bit and just glaze your meat with it. A couple teaspoons of this in a vinaigrette sauce, vinaigrette dressing rather, not a vinaigrette sauce, but a vinaigrette dressing. You know, oil and vinegar really spices it up. One of the things that I love, I'm not much of a cook. I love to preserve. My husband's the cook. But one of the simplest, easy hors d'oeuvres that you can serve, or a snack if you get called out after you've been working all day and you've got to go something and bring something. I gotta show you, this is the easiest thing you can do. So I'm gonna pull it out of the microwave. This is a regular little brie. I hope you can see that. Put it in a microwave plate. Put it in the microwave for 1:15 seconds. And you can see now it's all nice and soft and warm. Take your strawberry freezer jam over the top. There you go. And voila. In less than 3 minutes, you've got this lovely little appetizer to serve up for a snack. Put on some crackers or some baguette slices. Matter of fact, my husband is salivating over here. I promised him that would be our supper tonight. But this is a simple thing that you can do with some of your preserves. Be great with any type of berries, blueberries, raspberries, any type of jam that you have, whether it's a freezer jam or a regular water bath can jam. So, Melody, do you have any other suggestions for what to do?
Well, I have to confess, Jerry gave me some of the freezer jam, and I used cream cheese and a little bit of this, and I'm kind of a little bites kind of. I love hors d'oeuvres and little bites, and if you want a sweet and salty with your cracker and a little bit of the cream cheese, your soft white cream cheese, and a little bit of the freezer jam, and then top it with a caper. Those are delicious. The other, I like to use jams on waffles. I'm not a heavy syrup. If I'm going to have syrup, it's usually maple syrup, and like a good maple syrup. I'm not a big syrup fan and not a big sweet fan. So a little bit of this on the waffle, of course, is always a classic, I think. I think that delicious way that you could use that. And anytime you need a little something on the side that's just a little sweet, I could see it being used on your ice cream, just a little dab on as a topping for the ice cream. Delicious stuff. So I like to use jellies and jams in hors d'oeuvres. So I will put them with anything that's salty as well.
Well, fantastic. Thank you both.
Are there any other questions, Marina?
Not yet.
Okay.
Well, we hope we inspired you tonight to use some of this luscious bounty during this strawberry season.